The United States Congress has the moral and constitutional responsibility to maintain the operational security of the Texas-Mexico international border. And the stats are clear. 100,000 detainees in March, over nearly 300,000 charges filed against criminal illegal aliens since 2011. And the fact that the Senate is willing to state the obvious and go through the process of recognizing the detrimental results this border crisis has to the public in Texas is clear. The resolutions are passed out. You can see it's eloquently written, and more importantly, covers the gamut of the fact that Texas taxpayers are paying $823 million for border security this biennium. Our resolve clauses were really simple. The Texas Senate calls upon the United States Congress to adopt a budget that fully funds all means necessary to fully secure the Texas-Mexico international border, including but not limited to deploying personnel, implementing effective technologies, and erecting barriers where needed. That's Texas common sense. And we ask that Texas Senate did declare a crisis at the Texas-Mexico international border as an emergency. And today, by recognizing the obvious, we're joined by the senior senator, junior senator from Texas, because they too know that there's a crisis at the border. And with that, we'll turn it over to Senator John Cornyn first.
Senator Bettencourt, thank you very much. Governor Patrick, thank you for your leadership, as well as all of our friends and colleagues here. It's good to be here with Senator Cruz, my partner in Washington, D.C. It's good to see the Texas Senate standing up and doing what ought to be a bipartisan statement of what is actually happening at the border. I understand our friends from the other side call this an issue or a situation, but I will quote an authority, Barack Obama, 2014, called this a humanitarian and security crisis. That's exactly what it is. And if 76,000 people being detained at the border in February isn't enough for this to become a crisis, how about 103,000 people detained at the border in March? When it hits 200,000, will that be enough for them to acknowledge the obvious? How about 250,000? There is no reason why, because the pull factors are exactly the same, why those numbers will not continue to go up and up and up. Meanwhile, our Democratic friends have nothing to offer at all. So I really appreciate the Texas Senate stepping up and doing what Washington should be doing. And I would call on our friends across the aisle to work with us to come up with solutions. This is not about who wins and who loses in terms of a zero-sum political game. This is about solving problems. This is the Texas way of always solving problems, working together where we need to on a bipartisan basis to address the challenges that face our state and our nation. So I appreciate the leadership of the Texas Senate, and I'm glad to be here today. And I would ask my friends across the aisle, what are you going to do about the fact that Texas depends, the nation depends on trade with Mexico for about 5 million jobs in the United States. And increasingly we're seeing, because of the overwhelming of the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection at the Texas border, that longer and longer wait lines exist that we depend upon the movement of goods across the border on a reasonable basis in order to build the cars, manufacture the goods that create so many jobs here and in Mexico as well. So they have no answer. They're going to see the economy damaged. They're going to see people out of work before they are willing to acknowledge the obvious.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Paul. The sky is blue. Water is wet. And we have a crisis at our southern border. These are statements of obvious fact, which nobody outside the world of partisan politics would even venture to disagree with. Texans appreciate common sense, solutions to the problems we face. Here are a couple of statistics. In fiscal year 19, we've seen a 370% increase in family units being apprehended at the border. That's an enormous increase. To put it another way, in the first 6 months of fiscal year 19, we have seen almost as many people apprehended, over 500,000, as were apprehended in all of fiscal year 18. In 6 months, nearly as many people apprehended as all of the preceding year. How about drugs? Just in the last 6 months, we've seen 32,000 pounds of cocaine seized at the border. We've seen 2,250 pounds of heroin seized. We've seen over 120,000 pounds of marijuana seized. And we've seen nearly 1,000 pounds of the deadly fentanyl. Last year, roughly 70,000 people in this country died of drug overdoses. That's more people than died in car wrecks. And yet, some partisan politicians say we don't have a crisis at the border. In the last 6 months, 481 known gang members have been apprehended trying to cross illegally. 8,600 criminal aliens, illegal aliens with criminal records have encountered Border Patrol at the border. And you know, just a few weeks ago, John Cornyn and I were both down in the valley for the dedication of the Javier Vega Jr. checkpoint. Javier Vega Jr. was a Border Patrol agent who defended our nation. And he lost his life when he was out with his family, with his dad and his 2 boys fishing. And they encountered 2 criminal illegal aliens with multiple convictions who had been apprehended and deported previously and would come back, and they pulled guns on them. They shot Javier Vega Sr., and they shot and murdered Javier Vega Jr. John Cornyn and I teamed up in introducing legislation to rename the checkpoint where Javier Vega worked defending our nation, renamed it after him. And I'll tell you, the dedication was a powerful, emotional moment, recognizing the service, the sacrifice, the bravery. And you know, unlike the partisanship that we see sometimes here in Austin and a lot of times in Washington, I'll tell you, down in the valley, both John and I saw local elected officials. We saw the police chief and the sheriff. We saw the mayor of McAllen, who just recently wrote us and said, we're being overwhelmed. The volume of illegal crossing is overwhelming our capacity to deal with it, overwhelming the services. We need help. The mayor of McAllen called on Congress, put partisan politics behind you and solve this crisis. And yet, Senate Democrats, both here in Austin and in Washington, insist there is no crisis. Pay no attention to the suffering. Pay no attention to the children being brutalized by human traffickers, to the lives being lost to narco traffickers. Well, I'm here today along with John Cornyn to say thank you to the Texas Senate. Thank you to the men and women standing here with us for having the courage just to stand up and speak the truth. This is a crisis. People are hurting. People are dying, and enough is enough. And I call upon Senate Democrats, both in the Texas Senate and the U.S. Senate, stop playing partisan politics. Do what Texans are good at doing. Come together. Let's solve this problem. Let's end this crisis together. That's what the people of Texas expect from us.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. On behalf of the Texas Senate, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
I want to thank both of our senators, U.S. senators, for being here today. I want to thank every one of our Republican senators that are to our right and left here today for standing behind this resolution. Our number one focus is on the safety of the American public, the safety of Texans, stopping the gangs and the criminals from coming to Texas. But there's another side of this issue that when President Trump was in San Antonio last week and we met with a group of landowners, and they pointed out how many dead bodies they were finding on their land. And I want to know what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the Democrats in Washington, have to say about the dead children and women and elderly who are being left to die in no man's land in Texas, where water is scarce and they leave them with a half a bottle of water and maybe 50 miles to the closest point that they can walk to. Where are the Democrats standing up for the people they say that they're so worried about in these caravans? And since 2011, we have documentation of 1,671 dead bodies that we have recovered in Texas, many in Brooks County, which is a one-off county. That's what we found. Look at the photos. skeletons. It looks like something we'd see in a third world country where there's been some civil war in the dust. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of more out there. These are just the ones we've seen, of millions of acres. What about those people? What about the 59 young women that our TABC rounded up a few weeks ago at cantinas in Texas that were being forced to have sex with men in the sex trafficking game? And you know what we could do about it? Little to do nothing, because as soon as they brought them in, the drug cartels had attorneys there to free them, and those women were afraid to speak. We have human slavery today with children and women in the state of Texas and all over this country, and they're coming through the border, and the Democrats will do nothing to save these women and children. Nothing. They're deniers and they're deceivers. They either know the truth and deny the truth, or they know the truth and they're deceiving the American public. This is not a manufactured crisis. It's a manufactured cover-up at its highest level. And we talk about what happened in this nation as slavery 150, 175 years ago. What's happening today, right today? And the Democrats won't do anything about it. So we have to protect our citizens. Those landowners told us, they told the president, the Border Patrol has told them, do not go out at night unless you're armed. I talked to one rancher who's built his own fence, spent over $200,000 to build a fence around his home to protect his family. This is a tragedy for all people. No one should have to come to America and die to get here. In the back of an 18-wheeler or in the no man's land of the hot deserts in the summer. And no teenage girl should be brought across this border and forced to have sex 15 and 20 times a day. And you in the media need to start talking about that. Start talking about it. Make it a story. That's what the president said. This is the hidden story. Talk about this story. Go down there. Go to Brooks County. Look at these skeletal remains. Get the photographs. Breitbart has them all online. You can buy them and put in your news stories. Go to these cantinas. Do a story. Go undercover. Right now, there's some girl crying right now somewhere in some cantina. And there's somebody dying right now somewhere in Texas. Right now. So I thank these senators for standing up and pointing this out. And it's disgraceful that the other party, this is not a partisan issue. It's disgraceful they will not stand up and speak for our own citizens and for those desperate, desperate, desperate people being brought here by cartels who are making money off of them and allowing them to die. Thank you for being here. And now we have a senator. Paul, you have an order of senators.
Right. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and those were really, I think, very accurate and very heartfelt remarks, because there is a crisis at the border. I've got 19 great caucus members. We could have selected any of them to speak. We have, first off, Senator Huffman will speak on sex trafficking. We have our border security chair, Senator Campbell will speak next, and then we have, regardless of what you heard earlier today, we have a senator that represents over 400 miles of the border, Senator Flores. So with that, Senator Huffman.
Thank you. And I just echo the heartfelt words by the Lieutenant Governor, by Senator Cornyn, by Senator Cruz. But I want to give you another statistic that they haven't yet mentioned, and it's from the U.S. Border Patrol. Since October of 2018 and March of 2019, 35,898 children, that's between the ages of infants to 17, 35,898 children arrived at our borders unaccompanied, completely alone, without a guardian, without a sponsor, without a parent. Now, somebody tell me that that is not a crisis. How can you not think that as a nation, as we try to integrate these children into society, to find a place for them, that there isn't a possibility that one of those children, that thousands of those children will not end up in the sex trafficking trade? There's a recent study done in the last few years from the University of Texas that tells us that there are 79,000 minor and youth victims of sex trafficking in the state of Texas, done right here at the University of Texas. Do you not think that these thousands of children that the government is desperately trying to find where they belong, where they should be, trying to verify who can pick them up and who cannot, that some of those children aren't going to end up in the sex trade. And they tell us it's not a crisis. I ask each and every one of you to stop and just think about a child who has braved what it must take to get through Mexico and some of the lower countries south of Mexico to get to the United States, what they must have gone through. Do you think they weren't possibly abused or mistreated? Do you not think that understand why the Texas Senate has begged the government, the federal government, to do something about this? I know that Senators Cruz and Cornyn have been working on this. In Texas, we will continue to honor our commitment, and we've done it. The last few sessions, we've put hundreds of millions of dollars into the border. We've amped up our prosecutions of human trafficking. We've passed laws. We've had task forces. We do everything we can do, but we can't stop the flow coming over the border until someone takes this problem seriously. So I beg the Democrats to please work with these two senators. If for no other reason, do it for the children. Do it for the children. Mm-hmm. It's the moral thing to do. It's the human thing to do. And how, I ask you, can we do anything less? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Huffman. Senator Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your leadership, Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, and all my colleagues here. You've already heard over 100,000 migrants crossed our southern border illegally just last month. That is a crisis. The biggest threat that Texas faces is an unsecured border. Law enforcement is stretched thin. Criminals are exploiting the situation for their own gain. This is inhumane. Again, it's worth repeating. The biggest threat that Texas faces is an unsecured border. We need more border security officers. We need stronger barriers to stop illegal crossings. And we actually need carrizo cane controlled. That's vegetation that criminals hide in. So we need the removal of carrizo cane. The resolution that we passed makes it clear that we support our president's efforts to fix this broken system. We must solve this crisis. And it's not for something to be solved in the future. It's something we need to solve now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Campbell. Senator Flores.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. For those who don't know me, my name is Pete Flores, and I represent Senate District 19. I grew up on the border. I'm originally from Laredo. As a Texas game warden, I actually patrol the border in a law enforcement capacity. And as a Texas senator, I represent 464 miles of the Texas-Mexico border, including 2 major ports of entry and major ports of commerce. We share our culture, we share our family, business with Mexico. The enforcement of the rule of law is important not for us, for our nation and our constitutional republic, but also for the Republic of Mexico. So this is what this issue is about. The rule of law is out of whack. And we and our constituents are at our wit's end. The border today is not the border of my youth, when we could go across and they could come across and we welcomed each other, welcome each other's culture, commerce. It's just not the same today. The cartels, the criminals, the drugs they're infiltrating backyards, they're on the ranches and the farms of my constituents. This is a real crisis, it's not a new one, and the issue has plagued us for years. It's about time we fixed it. I've seen the devastating effects of an unsecured border firsthand. My constituents feel its effects daily. We know this is a federal responsibility. But where the U.S. government is lacking, Texas must step up. And we do it with a major investment. This is about enforcing Texas law. This is about quality of life. This is about our communities. This is not about rejecting lawful immigration. My wife's from Mexico City. My great-grandfather came from Bustamante, Nuevo León. They did it the right way. And we have an asylum process that is there to deal with those that genuinely need asylum. Let the system work. I concur with my colleagues, and I join them in this resolution proudly. And to say that I was not consulted about this, or that there was a member of the Senate that did not represent a significant portion of the Mexican border, or two major ports of entry, or whose population is over 65% of Hispanic heritage, is absolutely false. We all need help. This was the number 2 item that I would listen to as I campaigned for 3 years to be here in the first place, was secure our communities, secure our borders. We need to be able to go to our deer blind and not worry about somebody being in it that's not supposed to be in there. We'll enjoy our property, be safe in our communities. That's just what this is about, the rule of law, for our sake and for Mexico's sake, for our citizens' sake and for the citizens of Mexico and those that are being exploited by this. So I thank you for the comments. I thank you, my members of the Senate. Senator, thank you for what you're doing. Let's do something about it. That's what this is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, thank you for your time and attention. We'll have time for a couple questions.
What's new today? Obviously, this resolution passed a couple weeks ago. Is there something happening today that makes this new for any? Yeah,
Go ahead.
more girls are crying, more girls are being assaulted, more people are dying, more people are coming into this border, more drugs are crossing the border, more criminals are crossing the border. We cannot educate, medicate, and incarcerate the whole world. It cost our state billions and billions. What's new? More people are dying and suffering today. That's what's new. And it's going to continue day after day after day.
Senator, I asked the same question of the Democrats just an hour ago, that it seems like both you and the Democrats are calling for a resolution, a fix, unity on immigration, on these tough issues, and yet we're here hearing from one group and then the other in the same room. Is there any discussion that we should know about either in Washington or here in Austin, real discussion on substantive issues you agree on?
One group declared a crisis at the border. All 19 members of the Republican caucus did so. They did it with a resolution that clearly stated that there was a humanitarian and a security crisis at the border. Right here, this Texas Senate, headed by Lieutenant Governor Patrick, recognizes the obvious that there's a crisis at the border. And our 2 federal senators have come to thank us for recognizing that crisis. And so this is a side that's taking action and voting for something, because not only are we voting for this resolution, but we voted for consistently $800 million worth of money from the Texas budget to come to help fight what's happening at our borders. So there is a big difference between the 2 sides, because one side's recognized the obvious, that is, Lieutenant Governor Patrick said, that every day we wait, somebody else is crying, somebody else is dying, and it's time to stop lying about this to the American public and say, this is a crisis, and we call upon our federal colleagues and from the president, as well as both the houses of the Congress, to fix this problem. Texas has an $800 million budget item every biennium.
And voted on bipartisan,
Right, and unanimously, and that's my finance chair. And so we're recognizing the obvious with our money, with our votes, and we're willing to stand up to whoever we have to say there's a crisis on the border. And I want to thank both Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz for coming, and my colleagues, and also the ever-present leadership of Lieutenant Governor Patrick. So thank you, and we appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you for coming,
Thank you for coming.
by the way.
That's good. That's good. Well, we need more people like that.
Senator Klein? Is the threat of closing the border, is that gone now?
Is what?
Is the threat of closing the border gone, or is there still a chance that the president could?
Well, I tell you, the volume of humanity coming across the border is having the effect of closing the border.